My life was a fortress built of habit. At 35, I'd curated an existence so predictable it could be plotted on a graph. My job as an operations supervisor at a third-party logistics firm was the perfect fit for a man who found deep, almost spiritual comfort in systems. I managed schedules, optimized routes, and forecasted inventory needs. I turned the chaos of global shipping into neat, orderly lines on a spreadsheet. My apartment mirrored this philosophy. Books were arranged by genre and then alphabetically by author. My coffee mugs were aligned with their handles pointing due east. It wasn't exciting. It was controlled. And after Sarah, control was the only thing I trusted. Sarah had been my world for 6 years. She was vibrant and spontaneous, and she'd once called me her rock. I had worn that title like a badge of honor. I was dependable. I was steady. I was the calm harbor to her adventurous ship. It wasn't until she was leaving, her eyes filled with a gentle, pitying sadness, that I understood what rock really meant. It meant I was foundational but immobile, something to be relied upon, but not something that moved you. You're just so safe, Julian, she'd said, the words a death knell to my ego. I need something more, something that scares me a little. She found it in a rock climbing instructor named Kai, who probably had a man bun and an opinion on artisanal kombucha. The breakup was quiet, bloodless, and utterly humiliating. It left me with the quiet conviction that I was fundamentally boring. A safe bet, a piece of reliable furniture. So I leaned into it. I made my life a monument to safety and predictability. If I couldn't be exciting, I would be unshakably competent. This new, carefully constructed piece was disrupted by exactly one person, Amelia Davenport. Amelia was my counterpart, my rival, my professional nemesis. She was the other operations supervisor, and we were both unofficially, but very obviously, vying for the upcoming promotion to director of operations. Where I was quiet, methodical, and data-driven, she was a force of nature. She managed her teams with a combination of razor-sharp intuition, blistering wit, and a level of creative problem-solving that drove me to distraction. She saw solutions in the negative space of a problem, while I was still calculating the dimensions of the box. Our rivalry was the stuff of office legend. We communicated primarily through pointed barbs in morning meetings and meticulously crafted emails that dripped with professional courtesy and personal challenge. She would find a flaw in my logistics forecast, and I would find a potential bottleneck in her new routing algorithm. It was a constant, low-grade war fought with pivot tables and performance metrics. I respected her talent, but I found her very presence exhausting. She was a hurricane of charisma and confidence, and I was the guy battening down the hatches, checking my emergency supplies. Which is why I was still at the office at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, hunched over a proposal for the Westgate account, a massive potential client that could secure the promotion for either of us. The only other person left on the floor was, of course, Amelia. The vast open-plan office was a ghost town. The only sounds the hum of the HVAC system and the distant whir of the server room. Her desk was 100 feet away from mine, an island of organized chaos in the corporate gloom. I could see the soft glow of her monitor reflecting on her face, her brow furrowed in concentration. My own eyes were burning. I'd been staring at shipping cost analyses for 3 straight hours, and the numbers were starting to blur into a meaningless soup. Caffeine was the only answer. I pushed my chair back, the squeak of its wheels unnaturally loud in the silence. Her head snapped up. Giving up for the night, Julian? I knew you didn't have the stamina. Her voice cut through the quiet, sharp and amused. I didn't even turn to look at her. Just a tactical retreat for coffee. Some of us require fuel. We can't all run on pure, unadulterated spite. I heard a soft laugh, a sound I rarely heard from her that wasn't edged with sarcasm. Spite is a renewable resource, far more efficient than that sludge you call coffee. I walked toward the break room, my phone and her phone lying side by side on the edge of my desk where I'd left them at charge. They were identical. Same make, same model, same plain black case. A coincidence that was just another minor annoyance in the constellation of things that was Amelia Davenport. In the break room, The coffee machine gurgled out a tar-like substance that smelled vaguely of despair. As I waited, I leaned against the counter, rubbing my temples. The Westgate proposal was a beast. It required a complete overhaul of our current distribution model, and the solution was hiding from me, lurking just out of sight. I was tired, not just from the long day, but a deeper, more chronic exhaustion. The exhaustion of being so damned careful all the time. As the cup filled, a phone began to ring from the main office floor, its cheerful, generic chime echoing in the empty space. I glanced at the clock. 9:15 p.m. Who would be calling the office this late? Then I realized it was a cell phone. My phone. Probably my sister, Chloe, calling to make sure I hadn't fossilized at my desk. I grabbed my lukewarm coffee and walked back out. The phone was still ringing insistently. I strode to my desk, my mind already back on freight forwarding costs. Without looking down, I snatched the vibrating device off the desk, swiped to answer, and put to my ear. "I'm alive. I'm just buried in paperwork," I said, my voice flat with fatigue. There was a pause on the other end. Then a woman's voice, warm and unfamiliar and slightly flustered, replied, "Oh, I'm sorry. I must have a wrong number." I frowned, pulling the phone away from my ear to look at the screen. My blood went cold. The wallpaper wasn't my boring geometric pattern. It was a picture of a scruffy-looking golden retriever wearing a party hat. It was Amelia's phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had picked up the wrong phone. A stupid, careless mistake. The kind of mistake I never, ever made. Before I could stammer out an apology and hang up, the woman on the other end spoke again, her voice full of dawning recognition. "Wait a minute," she said, a smile blooming in her tone. You sound exactly like she described. Is this Julian?" The name hit me like a physical blow. She knew my name. Amelia described me to this person? My mind raced. Who was this? Her sister? A friend? Yes. I managed my throat suddenly dry. The woman let out a delighted laugh, a sound so genuinely happy it was disarming. "Oh, thank heavens. It's Eleanor, Amelia's mother. I'm so glad I finally get to talk to you. Honestly, it's about time. She talks about you nonstop." Nonstop. The word echoed in the cavernous silence of my brain. It short-circuited every preconceived notion I had about Amelia Davenport. Nonstop. My rival. The woman who communicated in thinly veiled insults and competitive fury. The woman I was convinced held me in a state of perpetual, mild contempt. She talked about me. To her mother. Nonstop. I think there's been a mistake. I croaked, my mind fumbling for an exit strategy. No mistake at all. Eleanor chirped, completely oblivious to my panic. She tells me everything. How you always have the data to back up your arguments, even when she hates to admit you're right. How you organize your desk so it looks like a magazine photo. She even mentioned that ridiculous cactus you have that you talk to. My cactus. His name was Spike, and I did not talk to him. I occasionally murmured words of encouragement. There was a difference. My brain was melting down. This was a catastrophic breach of workplace etiquette, a violation of the unwritten rules of our rivalry. I had intercepted a private call and was now receiving classified intelligence from the enemy's own mother. "Really, I should go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Oh, don't be silly. Tell me, are you two finally working together on that big Westgate thing she's been so stressed about?" She said if anyone could crack it, it would be you two, but only if you didn't kill each other first. Her laugh was warm and infectious, and in that moment, I felt a dizzying, terrifying wave of something that felt dangerously like affection for this complete stranger. From across the office, I saw movement. Amelia was standing up, stretching. She started walking toward her desk, toward me. Panic, pure and undiluted, seized me. "I have to go," I blurted into the phone, my voice strangled. I didn't wait for a reply. I jabbed the end call button with a trembling finger and practically threw the phone back onto my desk, as if it were radioactive. I snatched up my own phone just as Amelia arrived. She looked from my flushed face to the two phones, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "Everything all right, Julian? You look like you just saw the ghost of inefficient supply chains." My heart was a jackhammer. My mind was a blank slate. I had just committed a cardinal sin. I had crossed a line I didn't even know existed, and now I was armed with a piece of information that changed everything. Fine, I managed, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. Just tired. Long night. She studied me for a second longer, a small, curious frown on her lips. She clearly didn't buy it, but she let it go. She picked up her phone, glanced at the screen, and I saw a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She must have seen the call from her mom. Right? She said slowly, her gaze lingering on me. Well, don't let me keep you from your beauty sleep. She turned and walked back to her desk, the soft click of her heels on the polished concrete floor sounding like cannon fire in my ears. I sank into my chair, the lukewarm coffee completely forgotten. I stared at my monitor, but the numbers were just squiggles. My fortress of habit had been breached. A single, accidental phone call had planted a seed of chaos in my perfectly ordered world. Amelia Davenport, the woman I thought I had all figured out. She talked about me. Nonstop. The rest of the night was a bust. I couldn't focus. Every time I tried to analyze a data point, Eleanor's cheerful voice would echo in my head. She talks about you nonstop. What did she say? Was it all complaints? Julian alphabetized the spice rack in the break room today. The psychopath? Or was it something else? The comment about cracking the Westgate project together felt different. It felt like respect. I gave up around 11, packed my bag, and headed out into the cool night air. The walk to my apartment, usually a time for quiet decompression, was a mental tempest. I replayed every interaction I'd ever had with Amelia. The sharp-edged banter, the competitive glares across the boardroom table, the time she'd publicly corrected my forecast on the quarterly earnings call. I had always interpreted it as pure, unadulterated animosity. A professional chess match where she was always aiming for checkmate. But what if I had been wrong? What if the banter wasn't a weapon, but a language? A strange, combative form of communication I hadn't been equipped to understand. Sarah had wanted someone exciting. I was safe. Amelia was the least safe person I knew. She was a walking, talking risk assessment failure. And for the first time, the thought didn't fill me with a desire to retreat. It filled me with a terrifying, exhilarating curiosity. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling like a spy. I was armed with a secret, and it changed the very lighting in the room. When I saw Amelia at the coffee machine, my stomach did a nervous little flip. She was wearing a dark green dress that made her look even more formidable than usual, her red hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. "Morning," I said, my voice coming out a little too stiff. She turned, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised. "Julian, you survived the night. I am impressed. I had you pegged as someone who's in bed by 10 with a glass of warm milk." The old me would have retorted with something dry and sarcastic about the virtues of a proper sleep schedule. The new me, the me who knew she talked about me to her mother, heard something else entirely. It wasn't just a jab. It was a prompt, a test. She was poking at my predictable image. "Only on weekends," I said, surprising myself. "Weeknights, I'm a wild man. Sometimes I stay up until 10:30. Occasionally, I even leave a dish in the sink overnight." A genuine smile touched her lips, a rare and startlingly lovely sight. It transformed her face, softening the sharp edges and making her eyes sparkle. "My God, anarchy. I'm surprised the city hasn't issued a state of emergency." "I try to keep it under wraps," I said, pouring my own coffee. "Don't want to cause a panic." The conversation was light, meaningless, but the subtext was buzzing. I was watching her, really watching her for the first time. I noticed the way she tapped her fingers on her mug when she was thinking, the small, almost imperceptible frown that appeared when she was concentrating. I was cataloging details I'd never bothered to see before. Later that day, our boss, Henderson, called us both into his office. "Westgate is moving up their decision timeline," he announced, steepling his fingers. "They want a preliminary site visit and presentation. Day after tomorrow. In Ridgeway." Ridgeway was a 3-hour drive away. A jolt went through me. A 3-hour drive. With Amelia. "They want to see our faces, get a feel for who they'll be working with," Henderson continued. "I want you two to go. Together. Show them a united front. The final proposal isn't due for another week, but this meeting is critical. Don't screw it up. A united front. Us. It was a laughable concept. We were the north and south poles of the department. Amelia spoke first, her voice smooth as silk. Of course, Henderson will represent the company's best interests. The subtext was clear. Our best interests were a different story. As we left his office, she turned to me. My car or yours? Mine is faster. Yours probably gets better gas mileage and has a perfectly curated emergency kit in the trunk. It's not curated, it's just logically assembled, I said defensively. And we'll take my car. I'll drive. I don't trust anyone who views traffic laws as gentle suggestions. She grinned. Fine. But if you play any smooth jazz, I'm walking. The morning of the trip, I was a nervous wreck. I had cleaned my car to within an inch of its life. I even replaced the generic air freshener. I felt like I was preparing for a first date, which was an absurd and unsettling thought. This was a business trip with my rival, who secretly talked about me. She was waiting outside her apartment building when I pulled up, looking annoyingly fresh and composed for 6 in the morning. She slid into the passenger seat, bringing with her a faint scent of coffee and something floral. Wow, she said, looking around the pristine interior of my sedan. I stand corrected. This isn't just clean. This is surgically clean. I'm afraid to breathe too hard. Just try to contain your chaotic energy for a few hours, I muttered, pulling away from the curb. I just had the upholstery shampooed. The first hour of the drive was spent in a tense, work-focused silence. We discussed strategy for the meeting, volleying points back and forth like seasoned tennis players. It was familiar territory, the comfortable battleground of our professional lives. But my mind wasn't entirely on logistics. It was on the woman sitting next to me. It was on the fact that her mother's name was Eleanor and she had a dog that wore party hats. Eventually, the work talk petered out. The silence that fell was different. It wasn't tense anymore. It was expectant. So, she said, turning slightly in her seat to face me. Spike, your cactus. What's his deal? I nearly swerved. How do you know about Spike? I asked, my voice tight. Then I remembered. Eleanor. I have my sources, she said, a sly smile playing on her lips. I hear you're very close. I could feel a flush creeping up my neck. He's a very low-maintenance companion. Unlike me, you mean? The question was direct, a clean shot right through my defenses. Ich glänzte her. She was watching me, her expression unreadable but intense. This was a test. Another one. My old self would have deflected with a dry remark. But the phone call had changed the rules. I wouldn't know, I said, my eyes back on the road. I don't know you. Not really. The honesty of the statement hung in the air between us. It was an admission that everything we had been doing for the past year, the rivalry, the banter, the competition, was just a surface-level performance. She was quiet for a long time. I thought maybe I'd said the wrong thing, that I'd broken the unspoken code of our interactions. No, she said finally, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I guess you don't. The rest of the drive passed in a surprisingly comfortable quiet. We listened to the radio, a neutral indie rock station she didn't object to. I found myself acutely aware of her presence in a way I never had been before. The way her fingers drummed silently on her knee in time with the music. The way she'd look out the window, a thoughtful expression on her face as the landscape blurred by. I was seeing the person, not the competitor. We arrived in Ridgeway, checked into our separate rooms at the Bland Corporate Hotel, and met in the lobby an hour later to head to the client dinner. I was wearing my best suit, the one I saved for interviews and funerals. It felt like both. Amelia emerged from the elevator wearing a simple, elegant black dress. She looked stunning, and the thought hit me with the force of a physical impact. It wasn't an analytical observation. It was a gut reaction. You clean up nice, Julian, she said, her eyes giving me a quick, appreciative once-over. Almost look exciting. The word exciting landed like a punch. Sarah's ghost whispered in my ear. But coming from Amelia, it sounded different. It sounded like a compliment. The dinner was held at a stuffy, old-money steakhouse. We were seated with two of Westgate's senior executives, a man named Peterson and a woman named Clark, along with a junior VP named Richard Sterling. Sterling was the problem. He was slick, overly confident, and from the moment we sat down, he directed all of his attention to me, practically ignoring Amelia. He'd ask me a question about distribution networks, and when Amelia would start to answer, he'd cut her off to ask me a follow-up. He called her honey once, a casual, dismissive term that made my knuckles go white under the table. I saw Amelia's jaw tighten, the polite smile on her face becoming strained. She was a lioness being poked with a stick, and I knew she was more than capable of biting his head off. The old Amelia would have, in a way that was so professionally sharp it would take him days to realize he'd been disemboweled. But I remembered what her mother had said. If anyone could crack it, it would be you two. A united front. Sterling was pontificating about his own brilliant insights into the logistics industry. And the real challenge, of course, is future-proofing the supply chain against unforeseen market volatility. It's a man's game, really. Requires a certain kind of aggressive foresight. He gave me a conspiratorial wink, as if we were both members of the same exclusive club. This was it, the social test, my moment to shrink or to fight her battle, as she'd later put it. But I chose a third option. I took a slow sip of water, placing the glass down deliberately. That's an interesting perspective, Richard, I said, my voice calm and even. But it's a bit outdated. Aggression doesn't create foresight. Data does. And adaptability. In fact, Amelia was the one who developed the predictive model we're proposing. It uses a multivariate analysis to anticipate market shifts based on geopolitical and economic indicators. It's not aggressive, it's intelligent. She can probably explain the core algorithm better than I can. It's quite brilliant, actually. I turned to her, my expression open and expectant. I had passed him the ball, but I had handed it directly to her, right in front of the goal. I hadn't spoken for her. I had created a space for her to speak, and I had framed it in a way that made it impossible for Sterling to ignore her without looking like a complete idiot. The table went quiet. Sterling's smug expression faltered. The other two executives, Peterson and Clark, looked at Amelia with newfound interest. Amelia, for the first time since I'd known her, looked momentarily speechless. Just for a second. Then, she recovered, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. She leaned forward. "Thank you, Julian," she said, her eyes locking with mine for a brief, intense moment. Then she turned her full, formidable attention to the clients. The model Julian mentioned is designed not just to react, but to anticipate. She held them captive for the next 20 minutes. She was brilliant, articulate, and utterly in command. She didn't just explain the model. She made it sound like the most exciting, innovative thing in the history of shipping. I sat back, watching her. I had done more than just offend her. I had validated her. And in doing so, I felt a profound sense of rightness, a quiet click of a tumbler falling into place. Later that night, as we walked back from the restaurant, the air was cool and crisp. The awkwardness from the car ride was gone, replaced by a comfortable, shared energy. We had been a team, a good one. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice quiet. "Do what?" I asked, though I knew exactly what she meant. "Back there, with Sterling. You handed me the stage. He was being a condescending ass," I said simply, and I told the truth. "Your model is brilliant." We stopped at the entrance to the hotel, the automatic doors sliding open and spilling warm light onto the pavement. She didn't move to go inside. She just stood there, looking at me, her head tilted. "That was surprisingly elegant back there," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Most guys would have either tried to fight my battle for me, to prove they were the big, strong man, or they would have just shrunk and let me handle it. You just redirected, like you knew I could handle it, but made it easier anyway. You cleared the path." Her words landed directly in the center of my chest. She saw it. She saw the intention. She hadn't seen a safe man. She'd seen a capable one. She understood the nuance of the action, the quiet strength behind it. It was the complete opposite of how Sarah had seen me. This was the moment of being seen. "You're very observant," I said, my voice a little hoarse. "It's my superpower," she replied, a small, genuine smile on her face. Along with spite, of course. We stood there for a beat longer, the space between us charged with a new, unfamiliar current. The professional rivalry had dissolved, and what was left was something far more complicated and infinitely more interesting. "Well," she said, finally breaking the silence. "Good work today, partner." She turned and walked into the hotel, leaving me on the sidewalk, my mind reeling. Partner. The word echoed Eleanor's from the phone call. It felt like a promise. For the first time in years, I didn't feel safe or boring. I felt seen, and it was the most exciting feeling in the world. The drive back the next day was a world away from the tense, guarded journey to Ridgeway. The invisible wall between us had crumbled, brick by brick. We didn't talk about work. We talked about everything else. She told me about the scruffy golden retriever named Barnaby, who did, in fact, own a collection of ridiculous hats for every occasion. I told her about growing up with Chloe, my older sister, who had mercilessly tormented me, but had also taught me how to stand up for myself. We found a shared, surprising love for old, black and white noir films. The dialogue was just better back then, she said, staring out at the passing scenery. Sharp, economical. Every word meant something. Like our emails, I quipped. She laughed, a full, throaty sound that filled the car. Exactly like our emails. A modern-day His Girl Friday, but with more spreadsheets. I felt a lightness in my chest I hadn't experienced in years. This was easy. This connection, which I had assumed would be like wrestling a bear, was as natural as breathing. The witty banter was still there, but it wasn't a weapon anymore. It was a dance. A rapid-fire exchange of minds that was more intimate than any conversation I'd ever had with Sarah. When I dropped her off at her apartment, the end of the trip felt like a loss. "So," I said, my hands gripping the steering wheel, "I guess I'll see you at the office." It sounded lame, inadequate. She didn't get out of the car right away. She just looked at me, that perceptive gaze of hers seeming to peel back layers I didn't even know I had. "Julian," she said, her voice soft. "Thank you for the trip." "Anytime," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She gave me one last small smile and got out of the car. I watched her walk up to her building and disappear inside. I sat there for a full minute, the engine idling, the space where she had been sitting feeling profoundly empty. The fortress was gone. The walls were down. I was standing in the rubble, completely exposed, and all I could think was that I never wanted to build them back up again. The following week at work was strange. The air of competition was still there. The promotion hadn't vanished, but it was underscored by a new current of camaraderie. We found ourselves seeking each other out, ostensibly to discuss the Westgate proposal, but the conversations would inevitably drift. We were learning the topography of each other's lives, one small detail at a time. On Friday, after a grueling day of finalizing the numbers for the presentation, I found myself walking past her desk at the end of the day. She was packing up her bag. "Long week," I said, stating the obvious. "The longest," she agreed, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "I think I've earned a drink. A very large 1 inch. The words were out of my mouth before I could second-guess them, before the cautious, careful part of my brain could sound the alarm. "Can I buy you one?" She stopped, turned to face me. The office was emptying out around us, the evening light streaming in through the large windows. She studied my face for a moment, and I felt that familiar jolt of being truly seen by her. "I'd like that," she said simply. We went to a place a few blocks from the office, a bar with a sprawling outdoor patio strung with fairy lights. It was a warm evening, and the place was buzzing with the happy chatter of people celebrating the end of the work week. We found a small, secluded table in the corner. Away from the sterile environment of the office and the forced intimacy of my car, it felt different. It felt real. This was a choice. We had chosen to be here, together. "To united front," she said, raising her glass of wine. "To brilliant, path-clearing partners," I replied, clinking my beer against her glass. Her smile was warm and genuine. "You're never going to let me forget that, are you?" "Never," I confirmed. "It's going on your performance review." We laughed, and the last vestiges of tension between us seemed to meld away into the warm evening air. We talked for what felt like hours. She told me about her previous job at a smaller, more aggressive firm where she was the only woman in a senior role. She spoke about a past relationship, not mentioning a name, where her ambition had been a constant point of contention. He wanted a cheerleader, she said, swirling the wine in her glass. Not a teammate. The words resonated with my own experience. Sarah hadn't wanted a teammate either. She'd wanted a rock, a static, unchanging feature of the landscape. I know what that's like, I said quietly. Being put in a box, being valued for one specific quality to the exclusion of all others. She looked up at me, her eyes full of a sudden, deep understanding. The safe guy, she said, her voice soft. It wasn't a question. My breath hitched. How did she know? Of course she knew. She saw everything. Yeah, I admitted, my voice rough. The safe guy. There's nothing wrong with being safe, Julian, she said, her gaze unwavering. The question is, safe for whom? For them? Or for you? The question hung in the air, profound and unsettling. I had never thought of it that way. I had accepted the label as a judgment on my character, not on the person giving it. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over our table. Amelia, I thought that was you. The voice was smooth, confident, and dripping with an arrogance that set my teeth on edge. I looked up. Standing there was a man who looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine ad for luxury watches. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent, and he was looking at Amelia with a possessive, familiar smile. Amelia's entire posture changed. She went rigid, the warmth draining from her face, replaced by a cool, hard mask. Marcus, she said, her voice flat. What are you doing here? I was in the neighborhood. Saw you sitting here, he said, his eyes flicking over to me with casual dismissal before returning to her. Still playing Office Warrior? I see. I figured you'd be chained to your desk. Marcus, this had to be the ex, the one who wanted a cheerleader. He completely ignored my presence, leaning down to speak to her as if we were alone. I was thinking about you the other day. Remember that place in Napa? We should go back. He was trying to reassert control, to pull her back into a shared history right in front of me, to reduce me to an irrelevant piece of scenery. He hadn't even bothered to look at me again. I was just her co-worker. I felt a surge of cold anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was a protective instinct, fierce and unfamiliar. He was deliberately trying to diminish her, to undermine the ease and connection we had just been sharing. Amelia pulled back, her chair scraping slightly on the stone patio. Marcus, I'm in the middle of something. This, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand in my general direction. Doesn't look like much. He finally deigned to look at me, his eyes cold and appraising. Friend from work. Before I could even formulate a response, Amelia stood up. She was not as tall as him, but in that moment, she seemed to tower over him. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but laced with steel. His name is Julian, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. And yes, we work together. And we were in the middle of a conversation that you're not a part of. So you can leave. It was a clean, surgical strike. No hysterics, no raised voices. Just a direct, non-negotiable command. She had drawn a line in the sand, and she had drawn it with me on her side. Marcus looked genuinely shocked, as if he couldn't comprehend being spoken to that way. A flicker of anger crossed his handsome face. He looked from her to me, a sneer twisting his lips. Fine, he said, his voice tight. Have fun with your project. He turned on his heel and strode away, weaving through the crowded patio without a backward glance. The moment he was gone, the vibrant energy of the evening seemed to collapse. The happy chatter of the bar faded into a dull roar. Amelia sank back in her chair, her shoulders slumping slightly. The mask was gone, and in its place was a raw, weary vulnerability. I'm sorry, she said, not looking at me. She stared down at her wine glass as if it held the answers to the universe. Don't be, I said, my voice gentle. You have nothing to be sorry for. The easy banter was gone. The witty retorts were gone. What was left was the aftermath, a quiet, emotionally charged space filled with everything that hadn't been said. The stakes had just been raised exponentially. This wasn't a hypothetical discussion about past relationships anymore. The past had just walked up to our table and tried to drag her away. I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the faint tremor in her hand as she reached for her glass. I saw the cost of being the strong one, the one who always had to fight, and the quiet, careful man who had spent years building walls to keep this exact kind of messy complication out found that all he wanted to do was step inside it. With her. "Let me walk you home," I said. It wasn't a question. She looked up at me then, her eyes searching mine. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. We left our half-finished drinks on the table and walked out into the night. The comfortable silence we had shared on the car ride now replaced by a heavy, crackling tension. Every step felt momentous. The game was over. This was real. The walk to her apartment was only a few blocks, but it felt like miles. The city sounds, the distant wail of a siren, the laughter from a passing group of students, the rumble of the subway beneath our feet seemed to belong to a different world. Our world had shrunk to the few feet of pavement between us, the air thick with the fallout from Marcus's appearance. I kept replaying the scene in my head. Her quiet fury, her immediate, unwavering defense of me, of our moment. She hadn't hesitated. She hadn't tried to placate him. She had simply evicted him. From her space, from her time. It was a display of personal sovereignty that left me breathless. At the same time, the old, cautious Julian was screaming warnings in my head. This is complicated. This is messy. He's not going to just disappear. You were right to be careful. This is exactly the kind of emotional shrapnel you've been avoiding. For a moment, the thought of my quiet, orderly apartment, my predictable routines, seemed like a sanctuary. I could retreat. I could go back to being the safe guy. We could go back to being rivals. It would be easier, simpler. We reached the front steps of her building, an old brownstone with a heavy oak door. The street was quiet here, lined with trees whose leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. She stopped and turned to face me, her keys jingling softly in her hand. The light from a street lamp cast soft shadows across her face, highlighting the weariness in her eyes. "Well," she said, her voice quiet. "Thanks for the walk." It was a dismissal, a polite end to the evening. I could take it. I could say goodnight, turn around, and walk back to my sterile, controlled life. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. Say something, you idiot. Say anything. But the words wouldn't come. My brain, the organ I relied on for its logical, systematic processing, was a useless knot of anxiety. I was analyzing risk, calculating outcomes, trying to find the perfect, logical sequence of words. She watched me, her head tilted slightly. That perceptive gaze was on me again, and I felt utterly transparent. I could see a flicker of disappointment in her eyes. "Are you going to say something?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of its usual witty cadence. "Or are you just going to stand there calculating risk assessments in your head?" The words were a scalpel, cutting right to the heart of my fear, to the very core of the flaw I had mistaken for a virtue. She saw me. She saw the careful, cautious man building his fortress, and she was calling him out on it. She was challenging me to be more than that. The challenge broke the paralysis. A surge of something, adrenaline, frustration, a desperate need not to be the man she was describing, welled up inside me. The fear was still there, but suddenly the fear of losing this nascent, fragile thing between us was greater. "Yes," I said, the word coming out sharper than I intended. She blinked, taken aback. "Yes, you're going to say something?" Or "Yes, you're calculating risks." "Both," I admitted, a raw honesty breaking through. "I'm not just calculating risks. I'm trying to figure out how to say what I'm feeling without sounding like a complete and utter idiot. I'm trying to find the right words, but my brain has apparently shut down for unscheduled maintenance." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Try the wrong words, then. They're often more interesting." I took a breath, the air feeling shaky in my lungs. "Okay, the wrong words. Marcus is a jackass." "Those are excellent words," she said, her smile growing a little wider. A great start. And I hated the way he talked to you, the way he looked at you, and the way he looked at me. Like I was a piece of furniture. The word furniture slipped out, a ghost from my past with Sarah, and it hung in the air between us. Her expression softened with understanding. You're not furniture, Julian. I know, I said, and for the first time, I think I actually believed it. And this thing, us, this isn't a project. And I don't want it to be. I trailed off, fumbling again. What? She prompted gently. What do you want? This, I said, gesturing vaguely at the space between us. More of this. The talking, the arguing in emails, the drive to Ridgeway. Even this right now. All of it. I took a half step closer, the distance between us shrinking. I've spent the last 2 years trying to avoid anything complicated. I've been building walls and living by spreadsheets because I was convinced I was too boring for anything else. And then you're like a human hurricane. You just blown it all down. And I'm not even mad. I paused, then decided to deploy my last, most dangerous piece of intelligence. The nuclear option. And I know you talk about me. Her eyes widened. What? To your mother. I confessed, the words tumbling out in a rush. I answered your phone by mistake the other night. At the office. It was her. Eleanor. She said you talk about me nonstop. And ever since then, I've been going insane trying to figure out what you say. I've been replaying every conversation, every email, trying to see it from a different angle. And it's been driving me crazy. In a good way. Mostly. For a moment, she just stared at me, her face a mask of stunned disbelief. Then, she threw her head back and laughed. It wasn't a small, polite laugh. It was a real, unguarded, beautiful laugh that echoed on the quiet street. It was the sound of all the tension, all the pretense, shattering into a million pieces. Oh, my God, she said, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. You talked to my mother? And you've been holding that in all this time. It seemed like a breach of protocol, I said, a grin spreading across my own face, relief washing over me in a warm wave. You are unbelievable, she said, shaking her head, still smiling. My mother is a menace. She has no filter. I liked her, I admitted. Of course you did, she sighed. She probably told you about Barnaby's hat collection. She might have mentioned it. The laughter subsided, leaving us in a warm, comfortable silence. The vulnerability was mutual now. She stepped closer, closing the remaining distance between us. She reached up and rested her hand on my chest, right over my heart, which was still hammering away. For the record, she said, her voice low and intimate, her eyes locked on mine. I do talk about you. Nonstop. Good things, I hope. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Infuriating things, she corrected gently. Brilliant things. Annoyingly perceptive things. I told her you were the only person at that company who actually challenged me. That you were the only one I couldn't just bowl over. And that was it. That was everything. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I didn't assess the risk. I leaned down and I kissed her. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-perfect kiss. It was hesitant at first, a question. Her lips were soft, and for a split second, I was terrified I had misread everything. Then she responded, her hand sliding from my chest up to the back of my neck, her fingers tangling in my hair, pulling me closer. The kiss deepened, and it was like a dam breaking inside me. All the caution, all the fear, all the carefully constructed defenses I had lived behind for years were washed away in a flood of feeling. It was a kiss of recognition. It was relief and excitement and a terrifying, exhilarating sense of coming home to a place I'd never been before. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. I rested my forehead against hers, my eyes closed. The world had tilted on its axis. The graph paper I'd used to plot my life had been set on fire. So, she whispered, her breath warm against my lips. Was that in your risk assessment? I opened my eyes, looking into hers. They were sparkling, full of a light that had nothing to do with the street lamp. No, I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. That was an unforeseen variable. The best kind. She smiled back, a slow, beautiful smile that was just for me. Good, she said. I have a few more of those. The next day, I woke up feeling like a different person. The world looked sharper, the colors more vivid. The quiet order of my apartment, which once felt like a comforting sanctuary, now just felt quiet. I made coffee, my mind replaying the kiss on a continuous, glorious loop. Her laugh, her confession, the feeling of her hand on my neck. It was a chaotic jumble of sensations, and it was wonderful. My phone buzzed with a text. It was from her. My mother just called. She wants to know if you're free for dinner next Friday. I told her you're probably busy alphabetizing your canned goods. I laughed out loud. The banner was back, but it was different now. It was ours. It was threaded with the memory of last night, with the promise of something more. Tell Eleanor I'd be delighted. I typed back. And for the record, they're organized by food group, then expiration date. Get it right. Her reply was instantaneous. Psychopath, followed by a smiling emoji. This was new territory. We were Julian and Amelia now, a concept that was both thrilling and terrifying. We had to navigate what this meant at work, where we were still technically rivals for the same job. Walking into the office on Monday felt like walking onto a stage. I was hyper-aware of every glance, every conversation. I saw her across the office, deep in conversation with one of her team members, and our eyes met. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. It was a secret, a shared spark in the middle of our professional battlefield, and it sent a jolt of warmth through me. We decided to have our first real date that weekend, something completely removed from our work lives. No suits, she dictated over the phone. No talk of logistics, shipping, or Westgate. And no venues with fluorescent lighting. So, a candlelit dinner where we discuss 19th century poetry. Don't tempt me, she'd shot back. I was thinking the flea market. It's the ultimate test of compatibility. If you can survive 3 hours of me debating the merits of a rusty, mid-century lamp, you could survive anything. The flea market was a sprawling, chaotic wonderland of junk and treasure. It was a sensory overload. The smell of old books and fried dough, the cacophony of vendors hawking their wares, the sheer visual clutter of 1,000 lives' worth of discarded objects. It was Amelia's natural habitat. She moved through the crowd with a practiced eye, her gaze scanning over tables piled high with old vinyl records, tarnished silverware, and bizarre taxidermy. She was completely in her element. I, on the other hand, felt a low-grade anxiety. This was the opposite of my ordered world. This was chaos theory in action. "Look at this," she said, holding up a hideous ceramic cat with crazed, painted-on eyes. "It's magnificent. It's the stuff of nightmares," I countered. "That thing is definitely haunted by the ghost of a disgruntled librarian." "You have no soul," she said, but she was grinning. She put the cat down, and her hand brushed against mine as we started walking again. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers casually laced with mine. It was a simple, public gesture, but it felt monumental. Holding her hand in the middle of this bustling crowd felt more real, more solid than anything that had happened yet. It was an anchor in the chaos. We spent the next hour wandering through the aisles, our hands linked. I found myself actually enjoying it. I was seeing it all through her eyes, the potential in a stack of old postcards, the story behind a worn leather suitcase. She wasn't just looking at things. She was seeing their history, their possibilities. "That's what you do, isn't it?" I said, as she examined a set of old architectural drawings. "What?" she asked, distracted by the fine ink lines. "You see the potential in things. In a broken supply chain. In a rusty lamp. In a boring, predictable coworker." She looked up from the drawings, her expression softening. She squeezed my hand. "You were never boring, Julian. You were just hiding. And I'm very good at finding things." Later, sitting on a dusty curb and sharing a paper cone of lukewarm fries, we started to talk about the past. Really talk. I told her about Sarah, about the rock comment, about the slow, crushing realization that I was seen as reliable but not desirable. "She made you feel like a utility," Amelia said, her voice full of a quiet anger on my behalf. "Like a well-functioning appliance." "That's exactly it. I said, stunned by her immediate grasp of the feeling. And I think, after she left, I just decided to be the best damn appliance I could be. Efficient, dependable, low maintenance. But that's not who you are, she insisted. You're the man who quietly defends his partner at a client dinner. You're the man who drives 3 hours and doesn't complain when I control the radio. You're the man who talks to his cactus. I don't talk to him, I mumbled, but there was no heat in it. She smiled. And you let me think we were enemies for a year, just so the competition would be fair. That's not boring. That's honorable, and a little bit insane. Then it was her turn. She told me about Marcus. They had met in business school. He was ambitious, charming, and a rising star. At first, his confidence was attractive, but over time it became controlling. He saw her ambition not as a shared trait, but as a competition with him. He was always trying to manage me, she said, her voice tight with old resentment. He'd give me advice on how to be less intimidating in meetings. He told me I needed to soften my edges if I wanted to be taken seriously. He wanted me to be a successful woman, but only in a way that reflected well on him. He wanted the accessory, not the partner. The cheerleader, I said, remembering her words from the bar. Exactly, she confirmed. The day I got a promotion he'd been passed over for. That was the beginning of the end. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't stand that I had beaten him. I looked at her, at this brilliant, fierce, incredible woman, and the idea that anyone would want her to be less of who she was seemed like the greatest crime in the universe. We were two sides of the same coin. Both of us had been in relationships where we were misunderstood, where our core strengths were viewed as liabilities. She was too much. I was not enough. His loss, I said simply, and I meant it. In the weeks that followed, our lives began to merge in small, quiet ways. A book she'd finished was left on my nightstand. My favorite brand of coffee appeared in her kitchen cupboard. One Saturday, I came over to her apartment to find her struggling with a set of flat-pack bookshelves, a sea of particle board and incomprehensible instructions spread across her living room floor. "I'm about to commit arson," she announced without looking up. I took the instructions from her, scanned them for a minute, and started organizing the screws and dowels into neat little piles. An hour later, we had a fully assembled, perfectly level bookshelf. She stood back, looking at it with a kind of awe. "How did you do that?" she asked. I was ready to use it for firewood. "It's a system," I said with a shrug. "You just have to follow the logic." She came over and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "My quiet, capable man," she murmured into my ear. The words, which would have once sounded like a death sentence, now felt like the highest form of praise. My quiet competence wasn't boring. It was a form of care. It was the way I showed my love. The Westgate presentation came and went. We presented as a team, a perfectly synchronized unit. I laid out the data, the irrefutable logic of our plan. She brought it to life, painting a picture of a future where their business ran with an intelligence and efficiency they'd only dreamed of. We didn't just win the contract, we blew them away. A week later, Henderson called us into his office. The promotion, the thing that had started this whole rivalry. "You two have put me in a difficult position," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You both deserve this job. Your work on Westgate was the best I've seen in my 15 years here." I glanced at Amelia. Her expression was unreadable. My stomach twisted. After everything, was it going to come down to this? One of us winning, one of us losing. "So," Henderson continued, a slow smile spreading across his face, "I've decided to restructure the department. I'm creating 2 director-level positions, Director of Strategic Operations and Director of Execution and Analytics. They're co-equal roles, 2 heads of the same beast. The jobs are yours, if you want them." I looked at Amelia, a slow grin spreading across my face. She was already smiling at me, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph in her eyes. It was the perfect solution, the one we hadn't dared to hope for. We weren't just partners in life. We were going to be partners at work. A united front, made official. "We accept," Amelia said, speaking for both of us. And for the first time, that felt absolutely right. 1 year later, the sound of sizzling garlic and the scent of simmering tomatoes filled our apartment. It was a space that was a perfect blend of us. My minimalist, gray sofa was now home to a riot of colorful, mismatched cushions she had picked up at various flea markets. Her chaotic collection of books was now housed on a set of sleek, orderly shelves I had built for her. My single, stoic cactus, Spike, now had a neighbor, a flamboyant orchid she was determined to keep alive through sheer force of will. I was at the stove, stirring a pot of pasta sauce, a recipe I'd learned from a YouTube video and subsequently perfected through rigorous, systematic testing. Amelia was at the kitchen island, supposedly chopping a salad, but mostly she was scrolling through her phone and laughing. "Barnaby has a new hat," she announced, holding up her phone to show me a picture. The long-suffering golden retriever was now sporting a tiny, felt fedora. "He looks like he's about to crack a case," I observed. "He's investigating the mysterious disappearance of his favorite squeaky toy," she said gravely. "The cat is the primary suspect." Life was good. It was better than good. It was a chaotic, beautiful, wonderful mess. We were a formidable team at work, our different strengths complementing each other so perfectly that our department had become the most efficient and innovative in the company. Henderson called us his two-headed monster, a title we both secretly loved. The rivalry was still there, but now it was playful, a constant spark that kept us both on our toes. We'd argue over whose projection model was more accurate, then go home and argue over what to watch on TV. It was perfect. Tonight, we were heading to her parents' house for dinner. The dreaded, but now eagerly anticipated, dinner with Eleanor. My phone and her phone were lying side by side on the granite countertop. Still the same make, still the same model. Her phone began to ring, the cheerful, generic chime that had once sent me into a full-blown panic. The screen lit up with a picture of her mother. Amelia glanced at it, then pushed the phone towards me with a grin. "You take it," she said. "She likes you more anyway." I smiled, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I picked up the phone, the action feeling as natural as breathing. "Hi, Eleanor," I said, my voice full of easy warmth. "Yes, she's almost ready. I've been telling her we're going to be late for an hour, but she's been distracted by dog-related fashion emergencies." I could hear Eleanor's delighted laugh on the other end. "Oh, you're a good man, Julian. Keep fighting the good fight. I'll see you too soon." I hung up, placing the phone back on the counter. The memory of that first, panicked phone call felt like a lifetime ago. A different man, a different life. That man had been so afraid of complications, so terrified of being anything other than what he was expected to be. He had no idea what he was missing. Amelia came up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist as I turned back to the stove. She rested her head against my back. "She really does like you more," she murmured. "It's because I appreciate her matchmaking skills," I said, stirring the sauce. "And because I don't make her dog wear headwear." "The fedora was a gift from me," she said defensively. "He loves it." I turned off the heat and turned around in her arms, so we were face to face. "He looks like he's filing a grievance with his union rep." She laughed and swatted my chest playfully. Then her expression softened, her eyes searching mine. It was a look I knew well now. It was her seeing look. "What?" I asked. She reached up and straightened the collar of my shirt, a small, intimate gesture that made my heart ache with love for her. "I was just thinking," she said, her voice quiet, "about that first night, at the office, when you answered my phone. The great security breach of last year," I said solemnly. "The very same," she confirmed, a smile playing on her lips. "You know, for someone I talk about nonstop, you're still full of surprises." I pulled her closer, my hands resting on her waist. I thought about the man I used to be, the one who lived in a fortress of his own making, convinced that being seen was a liability. I looked down at the incredible, brilliant, infuriating woman in my arms, the one who had seen through all of my walls from the very beginning. She hadn't just seen me. She had discovered me. "Good," I whispered, leaning in to kiss her. "I plan to keep it that way." Being seen by the wrong person felt like a judgment. But being seen by the right person, that wasn't frightening at all. It was like coming home. Have you ever completely misjudged someone based on your first impression, only to find out they were nothing like you thought? What happened when the truth came out? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.